It's 1 a.m. in New York, 6 in London, and 2 on a Friday afternoon here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Moon Gun-young. We continue our special coverage on this capsize of a ferry here in Korea. More than 2 days have been passed since the Sewol-ho ferry capsized, and additional bodies are being recovered at the site, but no news of any more survivors just yet. For more details, we'll go straight over to our Hwang Sung-hee at the Central Disaster Safety Headquarters in Seoul. Sung-hee, what is the latest?
The bodies of 2 male students were recovered about 500 meters away from the capsized vessel less than 2 hours ago. This comes after the body of a middle-aged man who was wearing a life jacket was recovered earlier today. Now, this puts the total confirmed death toll at 28. 12 bodies have been confirmed as being high school students, 2 teachers, 3 crew members, and a passenger. 8 bodies have yet to be identified, but 5 are believed to be high school students. 268 people still remain missing, and unfortunately, the number of survivors remains unchanged. Kan-young?
Right, Sung-hee, but we do have some hopeful news as divers have successfully made or secured the route to the hull of the Sewol-ho earlier today. Now, we have been getting reports that they have not yet entered the hull, but they have secured the route, and they're currently trying to find ways to find any survivors inside the submerged ship. What can you give us details on that?
Yes, the rescue team successfully secured the route to the capsized vessel through the cafeteria at 10:05 a.m. Korea time today. The cafeteria is on the 3rd floor of the ship, and the rescue team has installed 3 guidelines that can reach there. 8 divers will be in rotation on a search for any survivors in the vessel. The time span that divers can remain underwater is about 10 minutes, and the team will begin a full-scale rescue operations in the cafeteria in about an hour Korea time today. The Coast Guard has also begun injecting air into the vessel earlier this morning to increase chances of more survivors. Now, Kan-young, with this, hopes are rising for news of possible survivors more than 2 days now after the Sewol-ho ferry capsized. But for now, no news of any survivors, and we still need to wait and see how the further sinking of the vessel will affect the planned rescue operations. Kan-young?
We'll definitely be crossing our fingers and hoping for the very best there. Thank you for that update, Sung-hee. That was our Hwang Sung-hee reporting live from the Central Disaster Safety Headquarters here in Seoul. Now let's go live to to the Pengmok Harbor on Jindo Island, just 20 kilometers from the site of the capsize. Our Kwon So-ah connects with us live. So fill us in with the current situation there.
Kan-young, I have to begin with some sad news. Bodies that were recovered, more bodies have been carried away just right now behind me. And meanwhile, the Sewol-ho ferry has disappeared out of sight. It is not more visible, which means there is a high chance that it has sunk entirely below the water. Now, although rescue crews have succeeded in entering the ship earlier, the death toll is rising, and that makes the situation more and more tense here. Now, families are crying and praying at the shore, and I also heard them expressing frustration against the government due to slow search and rescue processes, and also they were angrily shouting at reporters saying, "Stop filming us."
Definitely something. It must be harrowing times for these families of those missing. Now, so after searching for survivors, what's the next step going to be for the rescue operations?
Well, now discussions will continue on how and when to pull out the ferry. And earlier in the day, I said that 3 cranes had arrived here at the harbor, but around 30 minutes ago, the 4th and last crane has arrived too. Now, adding to the 4 cranes, a so-called floating dock will also be included in the process. Experts say that'll make it more effective. However, families are worried that the process could kill possible survivors, which means that they are still holding on to the last bit of hope.
And very, very understandably so. The slow progress has been blamed on the rough currents, which reportedly are shifting and keeping divers from being able to enter the vessel. The weather conditions are playing a big factor. How are they right now?
Well, the weather has been very capricious today, which makes the rescue efforts more harder. It has been raining throughout the day, on and off precipitation. Right now, it's just drizzling. So let's hope that the conditions will get better and that the rescue operations won't be hindered. Kwon-young, back to you.
All right, we will keep our fingers crossed. Thank you, Sohar. That was our Kwon Soo-ha reporting live from Pengmok Harbor down in Chindo. Now, for more details on the incident, we're joined live by our Kim Ji-yeon from the News Center. Ji-yeon, the investigative team held a press conference in the southern city of Mokpo earlier today. What did we learn from that?
Well, Kwon-young, the prosecutors and police said an investigation is ongoing to determine what led to the capsizing of the Sewol-ho ferry. What's at question is whether the sinking was a man-made disaster. It's being speculated that an abrupt turn to change direction caused the cargo in the vessel to shift to one side, leading to its capsizing. Fingers are being pointed towards the captain, who is believed to have been away from the steering room at the time of the incident. The team said the ferry's third officer, not the captain, was at the helm when the vessel encountered trouble. The investigative team said it had conducted 2 rounds of questioning on the captain so far, but that they are having a hard time grasping the truth due to differing testimonies. Investigators also added that it will draw up punitive measures against those that are spreading rumors through social networking sites about the accident.
Gianna, there are allegations the captain of the ship and some of his crew members abandoned the ship, and this has likely contributed to a much higher death toll. I mean, what should have been done by the captain and crew members? Of course, abandoning the ship is not one of them.
You're right, Kwon-young. They should not have abandoned the ship without making sure that the passengers were safely off the ferry. And there's a manual. This is clearly laid out in a manual at the Sewol-ho ferry, which lays out the steps for crew members should take in case of an emergency. In the manual, it states that the captain and some of the crew members should have made an announcement to the passengers explaining what was happening to the vessel and what they should do to escape to safety. And then the crew members should have stayed on board to help passengers make it on lifeboats before leaving themselves. But as you can see, not one of these regulations was followed by the captain and some of the crew members of the Sewol-ho ferry on that fateful day.
Right, something that needs investigation that is currently underway. Now, Jian, there have been reports of text messages thought to be from survivors on the capsized ship, but those were just unthinkable. But those are found to be pranks, and now there are talks about scams being used to take advantage of this tragedy.
That's right. The government is warning about a text scam that falsely indicated it's a message from Yonhap News Agency, and it includes a link to a video of the rescue operations at the site where the ferry is located. And smartphone users who click on this link, a malicious app is installed that will leak the personal information embedded in the device, and then induces the users to install a fake banking app that will then extract their financial information. The government is trying to prevent a further spread of this text and plans to distribute a vaccine to the users.
It's just appalling how even at times like these, times of distress, there are some people who would take advantage of others. It's just horrible. All right, thank you, Jian, for that report. Let's try getting a better sense of the situation down in Chindo, what might have caused this huge ferry to sink, and the terrain the rescue teams are dealing with there in Korea's southwestern coast. For that, Kim Peterson joins us live on the line. He is the president of Security Dynamics LLC and Governor Emeritus of the Maritime Security Council. Mr. Peterson, thank you for joining us. Let's start with the search and rescue operation underway down in Korea's southwestern coast. What is your assessment of the quality and the scale of the rescue operations? I mean, how does it compare with previous salvage operations carried out by other countries?
Well, first of all, I have to congratulate the various government and private entities that are working together on what has to be one of the most remarkable rescue efforts that I'm familiar with. Looking back on Costa Concordia, where you had a very similar situation with a vessel that sank and listed on its side, that was a much simpler rescue operation, particularly in as much as it was in shallow water, and yet they encountered significant challenges, just as the Korean officials are as well. But if you look at the rescue operation and the sheer number of divers that are on station, we're looking at well over 200 divers that are coming from the Korean Coast Guard, the Korean Navy. We have reports that elements of the Navy Special Warfare Flotilla, also known as the Korean UDT SEALs, are on station, which demonstrates the commitment that the government has placed on employing every opportunity to try to find survivors in this tragedy.
Kim, let me ask you this. It's been over 52 hours now since the accident. We do have this latest news coming in that the ferry, which at the top of the ferry had been on the surface of the water, that has completely submerged now. Now, how will the two operations help rescue survivors, and what does that mean? Will that hinder rescue efforts?
Well, of course, the question that everyone has is, if there are survivors, they're going to be found in voids. And where are those voids going to be? Because that's where air has collected and where hopefully there might be survivors waiting for rescue. The problem is, of course, it's virtually impossible to detect where those voids are. They have made efforts using hammers along the outside of the hull, trying to get a response back after hammering on the hull, hoping that somebody inside might signal back to them. That has not been fruitful, but the fact that they have managed to get into the vessel now opens up the hope that they might be able to find some survivors. But again, when you look at the operational environment that the divers are working in, you have 2.5 to 5 knot currents. You have heavy silt in the water, which is causing visibility from between 0 and 5 feet. We also have cold water of some 10 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which creates a hypothermic risk for anyone that's exposed to the water. And then, of course, you have the depth. And as you mentioned in your previous report, the divers can only stay down for a brief period of time before they have to be rotated out because of the potential for nitrogen narcosis and the bends. So it continues to be a very difficult situation.
Very challenging indeed. Now, reports indicate that at the time of the accident, only a few lifeboats were deployed. Now, in your view, why weren't all lifeboats sent out by the captain and the crew?
Well, here's one of the issues that we believe are being misreported. It is our understanding that there were no lifeboats per se on this vessel. That is, boats that do not have to be inflated through auto-inflation devices. What you have instead is reports of 46 life rafts. Now, these life rafts will not deploy until they have been manually released from the deck apparatus that lashes them to the deck. And what we have here is, again, a complication that has resulted from the delay by the captain to order an evacuation of the ship. It's our understanding that from the time this incident first occurred and the order by the captain to evacuate the passengers, some 30 minutes transpired and the vessel had already begun to list at least 5 degrees. If that's the case, by that time, it would have been virtually impossible, having given that order to evacuate the ship, for the ship's crew to get onto the decks and manually release the life rafts so that they could go into the water and inflate. And I believe that this is part of the reason that there are only 2 known life rafts to have been deployed. And this just goes to show how critical it was to give the evacuation order earlier rather than later.
Right, and investigations are currently underway on the captain and whether he neglected his duties with regards to the evacuations. Now, Kim Peterson, we are talking about a 6,800-ton vessel. We have been reporting about possible air pockets where survivors may be found. Now, given the structure of this ferry, how great a possibility do you think this is? And if so, what are the chances of survival given that it's been more than 2 days?
Well, if you do have survivors that have found their way into voids within the ship, and if they've been able to not be submerged in the water and therefore, potentially becoming hypothermic, remember that given the temperature of that water, somebody sitting in that water probably has about 2 hours before they become severely hypothermic. So if you have people that are in dry areas, in air pockets, there is the possibility of being able to locate them. But then the challenge becomes getting them out of the vessel, particularly if they're also injured. And of course, they're going to be tired, hungry, frightened, and inexperienced in all likelihood with the type of apparatus that the divers will be using to get into their location.
President of Security Dynamics and Governor Emeritus of the Maritime Security Council, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. It has been over 54 hours since the accident, and as the hours turn into days, the families of the missing are trying their best not to lose hope and are waiting at an indoor auditorium on Jindo Island for any news about their loved ones. Our very own Yudian is there at the auditorium, and she connects live with us. Liana, how are things looking there?
Hi, Gonyang. There is quite a bit of commotion here. It seems the families have received a report saying that the divers are shuffling through dead bodies in the ferry to look for any remaining survivors. One of the parents announced the report through a mic just minutes ago. That report, however, is not confirmed, but the news is hitting the families of victims hard, and sounds of weeping and wailing is filling the auditorium as I speak. Everyone here has been watching in silence. The monitors that show live feed from the site of accident and news footage as well. It was just a couple of hours ago that there were sighs of relief and applause following announcement by the Coast Guard here that air is now being pumped into the ferry and that divers have successfully entered it. Officials from the Coast Guard brought out a blueprint of the ferry at the front of the auditorium, explaining how the divers are expected to carry out the operation. Now, earlier this morning, the head of the victims' families here issued a plea statement, which was broadcast nationwide, asking people across the country to help them rescue their children. Families here are feeling they need all the help they can get after finding out that the number of rescue personnel announced by the government and the actual number is quite different. The government had announced yesterday that around 555 personnel were put into the rescue operation, which stands in stark contrast to about 200 personnel that the families here found out were actually deployed.
Well, I can't even begin to imagine what it must be like to be in their shoes. They must be traumatized. I hear they are receiving counseling as well.
You're right. There is a special care center set up here at the gym where nurses and medical personnel are taking care of people, also offering mental help for many that are distraught here at the gymnasium. The past 2 nights have been extremely hard for these families of the victims. They've been under an overwhelming amount of stress. They simply
exhausted as many of them aren't sleeping. There are about 500 volunteers on site to help out at the relief center here, and also food trucks outside from various welfare centers for those who haven't gotten a chance to eat lunch. And volunteers are also walking around handing out drinks and snacks. Kanyang?
It's very important for them to stay healthy and stay put as they wait for hopefully good news. Thank you, Lian, for that report. That was our Yulian reporting from Jindo Indoor Auditorium, where many of the family members of the now 268 missing are gathered waiting for news of their loved ones. Now, meanwhile, 179 passengers were rescued on the day of the accident. They may have survived, but many of them have to be treated both physically and psychologically. Let's now go live to our Connie Kim. She joins us live from the Korea University Ansan Hospital, where the largest number of patients are being treated as we speak. Now, Connie, before we talk about the survivors, I know more bodies have been brought to the hospital. It must have been an emotional scene. What's the atmosphere there like?
Right, Kanyang. I'm at Korea University Ansan Hospital, and earlier in the morning, an additional 2 deceased passengers have been brought here, and the atmosphere at that time was absolutely devastating. Relatives were crying out loud, and as we speak, relatives and friends are still sobbing inside right now. A total of 5 of the dead are here in the hospital, and the names of the deceased are being shouted out here and there. Parents are crying out loud, they're hugging each other, and some are saying that they didn't even have a chance to speak to their children before the vessel went down. Now, and with the endless stream of sobbing friends and families paying their respects at the hospital, Tanon High School is considering to set up an incense altar within the school.
Well, a number of the students who managed to escape the sinking ferry with their lives are also receiving treatment at the hospital. How are they doing?
Well, at around 12:30, there was a press briefing held here, and the director of the hospital said there are currently 76 patients receiving medical treatment here. Now, 72 of them are Tanon High School students, along with 1 teacher and 3 other passengers. He said a stress test was conducted on the students and said most of the teenagers are suffering from moderate levels of stress, but declined to mention specific numbers. He also said depending on their mental conditions, they have provided counseling sessions to both parents and students. Officials say there are teenagers with harsh critical conditions who cannot speak at the moment from shock. They said they'll continue to provide help to students and parents and will also cooperate with the Education and Ministry Welfare as well.
All right, thank you, Connie, for that. That was ARIRANG News' Connie Kim reporting live from Korea University Ansan Hospital, where many of the injured are being treated. Now, back to the rescue scene. The salvage cranes that will lift the Sewol-ho ferry up from where it sits have arrived at the scene a little earlier than expected. And as our Soa told us earlier in the newscast, but it could take up to 2 months to get the 6,800-ton ferry to shore, and authorities aren't yet sure whether the lift will start. Our Song Ji-sun has the details.
4 years ago, when the Korean warship Cheonan was sunk, it took 1 month to lift it from the ocean floor, and it weighed just 1/5 of what the Sewol-ho does. The passenger ferry, at more than 6,800 tons, is one of the largest operating in the nation. 180 vehicles and cargo weighing 1,200 tons were on board when the ferry departed Tuesday evening local time. Add that to the water that has since inundated the ferry, the total weight that the cranes will have to lift easily exceeds 10,000 tons. 4 cranes with capacity of 10,000 tons combined have approached near the waters of the sunken site and are on standby. But the government says the lift will not be carried out without the consent of families of the missing, as shifting the vessel could jeopardize the safety of possible survivors who at this point would have to rely on air pockets to stay alive. The ferry must be turned upright first in order to be lifted to minimize further damage and to stabilize the lifting process. Divers will fasten cable wires underwater to the vessel to lift it, but authorities say the lack of experience in lifting a vessel of this size, along with fast currents and poor visibility, could delay the process. Song Ji-sun, ARIRANG News.
Now, the search for survivors in waters off Korea's southwestern coast continues, and joining us now is Michelle Park for a look at the conditions down near Chindo where the ferry went down. Michelle, how are the conditions looking like right now?
Well, it's a bit foggy at the moment, but it looks like it will clear up more into the day in Chindo, and the velocity of the tidal current is estimated at between 1.8 and 10 kilometers per hour. Now, there are 3 times of the day when the slow tides will be coming in, which would help the search and rescue efforts. Now, one of them has already passed at 10:20 this morning, but there is 2 more coming in at 4:29 this afternoon and the other one at 10:25 p.m. local time. Now, the water temperature is currently at 13 degrees, which is a bit warmer than yesterday, with winds blowing at about 4.8 meters per second and the height of the waves at 0.6 meters. Now, we'll continue to monitor this situation down near Chindo and just hope for the best. Now, that's all for the moment. And Michelle Park, and back to you, Ganya.
All right, that's all from me at this hour. Our special coverage on the nation's search and rescue efforts for survivors in Korea's ferry disaster continues. Join me again at 4 p.m. Korea time.